today the first meeting is how do we pay ourselves? And so, we've been parts of many different organizations, and a lot of people here have been part of the Giveth organization in one way or another. And the way Giveth does things is really weird and different. And I'm okay with doing things a little weird and different, but we have to remember that the Common Stack is not Giveth, and that things are definitely happening very differently. Number one, we have a legal entity. Number two, we are way more accountable to our donors than a normal charity because there is this kind of investor vibe. Number three, we have a very well detailed roadmap and budget and scope of what we're doing through each course. We're not going to be able to be as like, oh, we could do this, we could do that kind of attitude. And and the real thing is that this is a race and a competition, whereas for Giveth, it's not about competition as much. Now, when I say competition, I don't mean that we should be anti-collaborative, but more on this is a race and we need to get this shit done as soon as possible. So yeah, I want to. There's the Common Stack kind of has two areas of payments. We have internal core team, and where we are apportioning funds to ourselves and the people that are here. And then we also have external vendors, where it's more of a milestone-based payment. We say, here's a specification, fulfill the specification, and we will give you this bulk of money on more of a milestone basis. So I want to start with that. So because that's in this call, the only person who's really here right now for that. Well, I guess Giveth is as well through me, but I understand it. So the only person who isn't me or Giveth, like the Giveth DApp, is Block Science and Zargum. So we're going to start with the vendor ideas. And in general, the goal would be for the vendors to be very milestone focused. So here's a bulk of money. It's sitting in escrow until you accomplish the specific task. For the first iteration, for example, there is open sourcing CAD. There is, that's $200K in escrow until it's open source. That should be like minutes, but, oh, you're muted.
Pre-running on a bunch of these things. So like I've been burning resources as just like out of my own organization because so much of this aligns with my personal goals for the future that we're going to be a little more aligned than a standard vendor scenario because there's like we're essentially front running because we know and help plan the roadmap. Yeah. It's still good to talk about procedures because the expectation is that these are escrowed funds that will be earned on approval of deliverables. But I will say we want to make a step back and have the conversation in general too, because most vendors won't have the liberty of essentially pre-working because they won't have been as involved in the road mapping.
Yeah, I mean, your guys are definitely a special case because you'll almost be writing the specification for your own work, whereas no other vendor will have that sort of liberty because they're not in the planning stage as much.
Well, and that's not unreasonable given that we're talking about engineering design where we're describing the design layer where we're taking requirements as a group. Essentially, this core org is how you and me and Jeff and everyone on this call has participated in what I would call the business or system requirements, and then an engineering organization's job is to turn that into a level down design, which further is involved in specifications for the execution by construction level contracting using your sort of power plant examples. And so I do think we want to talk about the difference between design level stuff and implementation level stuff during this conversation because the validation process and sign-off processes may be different. Generally, well, again, it's engineering stuff that you're familiar with, but I'm always like to be transparent about things, and we want to talk about the difference between approval processes for specifications and designs versus approval processes that sort of validate correctness of implementations.
Well, what are the big differences there, would you say?
Well, so generally, designs are validated against their business requirements. In a sense, we say we want to design a system that has certain properties. And we do things like CAD to demonstrate that the design is going to have properties under certain conditions. So that's CAD exists in part for design validation. So the design can be signed off on by the stakeholders, this core group, and then we can say, yes, this design is good, it's what we wanted. Whereas when you implement, you back test to the design. You say, well, the design showed that it would have these properties. We want to run test schemes in the implementation that demonstrate that the properties that were proven in the design. So there's a two-step process, business level human requirements validated on the design, and then the implementation is validated against the design, which is validated against the goals, right?
Yes, for sure. And I do think, though, within the design, there will be specific deliverables that we can say, we will have a model that represents the design in CAD.
Yeah,
right?
But that's passing the blueprints, right? So it's the deliverable isn't the instance of the software, although ironically in this case the blueprints are often software.
Yeah.
We're still saying that we're talking about a thing that represents the blueprints for a system relative to the implementation. So you're testing, again, you survey a building and compare it to the specs and the blueprints. But when you analyze the blueprints, you compare them against the goals of the people hiring the architects.
Yes, and I would say that to be more specific about budget as opposed to requirements for passing a milestone, the general standard will be some percent upfront, probably closer to 5 to 10% upfront, and staggered milestones. Now, open sourcing CAD is an interesting one where it's just a bulk 200K plus a 50,000 buffer for documentation, or that will be a later milestone.
And just so that you guys sort of understand, because we're really the only design firm, we're kind of getting around the problem where normally that would be really hard for a design firm because our costs are spread out and high. But the point of we have all this backlogged work that we want to deliver, we can get a bulk up front and put some cushion on ourselves that allows us to spend money and time doing the next ones and earning the deliverables, basically completing the deliverables and earning the allocations. I will note that in general, that would have been really hard because the design work is sort of, it has a different cost, deliverable shape, and as a result, wouldn't normally be something where you can do full, most of the payment at the end. But we are, as a group, sort of avoiding that trap by saying, look, we can actually bootstrap this because we have a large set of pre-done deliverables. So we can get those out, we can get paid, and then what is essentially going to happen is we're going to have to burn down that capital to get the next thing done, to earn the next bucket, which would be, again, traditionally hard, but we've set ourselves up to make it possible. You see what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's why 5 to 10% will always be upfront because people need some money and liquidity to push forward, and then we have clear deliverables outlined in advance before any of this money goes out, before even the 10% goes out. We have clear deliverables of what the milestones are. That will probably be about 25%, 25%, 35%.
And I think that's awesome. And I think this is important learning just from the fact that you've already done a decent amount of milestone management, even if it's not at the same level, where we've sort of already got, human processes in place for, essentially checkpointed labor so that it can't just diverge and then, so no one benefits from that, right? Yeah. You want things to stay aligned. There's sort of cycles through which there's both approvals and money and sign off that's not so high frequency to be a pain in the ass, but not so low frequency as to allow for things to diverge.
Yeah, and for other vendors as well, the Aragon ecosystem has modeled this fairly effectively. And I will say that they have been really steadfast, if not even a little difficult to deal with on the milestones. So most of the vendors that we will be speaking to understand that. Level K has worked in that system. Also, most of the people in DAO stack that we would work with have worked with the Aragon milestone system.
Yeah,
So
I kind of agree with you. I think, like, you know, if anything, there's room to error in the other direction, because this is sort of, because what we're doing is meant to be transformative and it is meant to be like a, you know, just, it is what it is. I think that it is important to remember that you hire contractors in part for their expertise, and that there's a skill associated with management, associated with not having everything be like so hard coded that it's impossible to work within. There's like a balance between degrees of freedom and absolute specification, and that striking that balance is actually one of the most important management skills. And that while we can't obviously put there's no like number or parameter to put on it, I would say we want to be error in the direction of more flexible than Aragon, but also just not so flexible as to break down our own process.
yeah, exactly. So in general, that's the vendor idea, you know, 10%-ish upfront, 25, and then a bulk payment at the end. And I don't want to spend too much more time on that yet.
So, do I understand correctly that, like, so the vendor payments go to the Aragon app? Is that what you were saying?
Vendor payments will be on escrow. So if there is whatever the best escrow system is, then we will use it. If it's Giveth, then it's Giveth. If Aragon ever pulls out an escrow system, then that would probably be easier for the first iteration. But I actually expect for vendors we will use Giveth.
Okay, yeah, because I just wanted to say, like, the best system out there, Aragon is probably going to move faster because they have more budget. But like, if we use Giveth, like this project started also from Giveth, it will be motivation to also continue to optimize the blog.
Yeah. I mean, the milestone system in Giveth works fine.
Well,
so
right?
yeah, I mean, it has more depth to it than anything else I know. So
I hope we can do it, because otherwise this is coming from Giveth and block science, and now we use Aragon.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good transition to our overall accounting strategy, which maybe I'll say what I think, but I want Baron to respond afterwards. That we will be using a multi-sig to store all the funds, and the plan right now is to move the day-to-day payments, like 2 months budget, to an Aragon DAO, and use the payments app that is not quite out yet, but it's so fucking close. The payroll app, that they have to do payments. And then we will actually be planning on doing just one monthly payment for each person for that kind of salary stuff. So if it's hourly or salary, we would only pay once a month to keep overhead down for our internal budgeting and administration. And then for bulk supplier agreements, like for the Giveth app, it would go multi-sig Aragon, and if need be a person, and then Giveth, or multi-sig Aragon directly to Giveth, because we want to keep all the accounting consistent. Like, even though we could skip from multi-sig to Giveth, it's just nice to have all the funds be flowing through the same direction. Coach B, I don't know if you have any things to add or even subtract.
No, I agree. It should be one system that we use, and we can down the road we can change, like the supply, or the how do you say, the milestone system. Like, if we change from Giveth to Aragon, if they have a better escrow than in place, that doesn't matter to me, but the process should always be the same. So that's And I really have to look into that. I cannot even judge on those two, like the Giveth and Aragon, and how this works together. So to me, it just has to be at the end. I need almost like a spreadsheet, and I can sort of subtract that from whatever system we use. But I need to know what is the income, what is the outcome, what is the payment for, and so on. The best form to me is a spreadsheet, because that's something that I can give to into the bookkeeping, then to the tax and whatever authorities.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine despite everything being on the blockchain, bytecode is very difficult to analyze sometimes. So we'll make sure it all ends up on a spreadsheet.
What does Giveth add to that payment flow?
Giveth adds the escrow, the trustless escrow. So Common Stack puts money there, and it's there, and it will be
individual payments or
vendor payments. Individual payments will go straight through.
Gotcha.
There's no
Okay, that was my question.
just vendors. Yeah, and so now we get to go into individual people, right? And how do we? The real goal of this strategy session is to discuss how do we pay ourselves. And so this is going to be dependent on a lot of things. The biggest thing is, how easy is it to divide your work into an hourly thing, or is it just a salary, right? Some people are used to contract work in an hourly rate, and so then we can maintain that, especially if the plan is to do, like random hours that are more focused based off of like demand, versus salary, where it's like, no, this is like, give us as much as you can the whole time, kind of a flow. So the more part-time you are, the more likely we go with an hourly based contract, and the more full-time you are, the more likely we go with this is your monthly pay, give us as much as you can, right? Then on top of that, whether it's hourly or month or salary, we will have a supplier agreement, which all of you guys have been playing with lately. So the supplier agreement is also an opportunity for us to discuss, like, what are our goals this month? What I don't think has come up very much is the amount that you're getting paid, but that's going to need to be part of these supplier agreement conversations, where it's like, okay, this is what we expect from you, and this is the pay rate, sign off on this. And we'll do that every month. Yeah.
I was gonna ask, after like 10 months, if there's not much change month to month or something, like, can we space it out and just check in when necessary? Like, once we establish a rhythm with it?
Potentially. I mean, I do think that there's a lot of value in taking the space to like take that as an opportunity to analyze what am I working on, how do we
still align with the mission?
Yeah, maybe I need to pivot because of some external factors, or some things, and making the space to do that every month, while in some way slowing us down in the short term, I think will
It's a good point, yeah.
push us forward in the long term. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, it's well said.
I think that almost would be more helpful for me as like a strategic touch point with other people working on that, rather than like, what am I doing this month? It's like, what is the team doing this
It's more
month?
useful as a multiple person break off.
I do think that, so there's like two pieces with the supplier agreement. It's like agreeing what you will be paid and what you're going to. The two pieces of the agreement are what you're going to be paid and what you will be doing to earn that pay. And what you will be doing is going to change every month, and I think that's the piece that we want to be able to stay agile on.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone is expecting this other piece to be agile every month. Like, we're not expecting people's amount of compensation to change on a monthly basis. So I understand maybe like that is this thing where it's like, oh, at some point I want to not feel like every next month my pay could change or disappear or whatever. So maybe there's a way to like kind of fix that a little bit more and put it more into like the assumption is this this doesn't change,
Right,
and the
right.
contract is a way, the monthly contract is a way for us to like change it upon these certain signed parameters if need be.
Right, and
Right,
it
but
helps us
otherwise
keep
we-
like a really important discussion always happening too. So it's, I mean, I understand the value. in
But
having
yeah,
it.
like the monthly thing is not because we want to change people's pay.
Right.
Not for you.
Raise everything.
I want to piggyback off that, and then I'll let you say. As far as changing people's pay every month, actually, it might change every month for salary people, and it probably won't change at all for hourly people, just because it's based off of an external issue. So, like, if we raise the way the budget is structured, if we raise just the 1 million, then everyone will all the people who are salary will actually be paid less than if we raise 2 million.
Right.
Right? Because we'll have less work to do. So one of the things, at least the way the budget is structured, is that everyone, if we only get to the first milestone, the first iteration, then everyone's basically part-time. So,
Right.
but then if we get to the second iteration, we'll have twice as much work to do almost, because we'll be managing 2 different projects simultaneously. And if we get to the third iteration, then we'll have 3 times as much work to do. And there will be some economics of scale there, of course.
Right.
But once we get to the third, and once we get to the fourth iteration, it's like every salary person is full time.
Right.
You know, we will have too much work to do, and that's why in the fifth iteration we even need to hire more people, because we're going to be working on all these projects simultaneously. If we get enough money to do it, but if we only get a smaller amount of money, our budget is much less.
But those changes when we get to a new bracket of fundraise, they aren't like, oh, something we'll just hash out when we get there.
No.
It's already been like very detailedly planned in the budget, and you guys are each going to get, we're calling it a compensation array, and it's a table that says, phase 1 through 6, like, and how many months of work there is for you, what you will be paid monthly, and what your bonus would be based on if we raise 984K. And then what those payments are based on if we raise 1.62 million.
Right.
And then if we raise, all of those 6 levels of fundraise. And so it's something that is going to be, this array is going to be in the contract. So when we go into signing these contracts, we really are looking at like future projections and signing on like, do you feel like good about committing to this project long term? Do you foresee yourself in general like sticking with this and wanting to help us get to that 1.62 so that you can have a raise, and like are you motivated by that? And like even though we have these contracts for 1 month of work specifications, it really on the like economic and commitment side, they're visioning a lot further into the future. So
From like my point of view, the budget should be dedicated not to people but to strategy outcomes. So for example, helping the token engineering commons raise funds, or for example, to communicate in our like vision of how commons should be built and so on. So we can dedicate specific budget like 2K, 5K or something. And then we can involve work of 1 or more people, but we kind of can manage like spendings based on what we want to prioritize. And then, for example, if somebody in a month doesn't see like lots of tasks for his role, he can switch to help other outcomes, for example, and that would balance the system and also be easier to manage. And it can create some unpredictability in terms of how much you want to get, but it also align like all people with a strategy. So they will kind of feel that, for example, in some strategy points now, there are like projects, and projects have ending. So for example, people can work a lot on raising funds, but as well as at the time when we raise funds, basically this project is closed, right? So what do I do next? So in order for people to understand that, we would rather have this recurring strategic budgets that we can set for like 3 months or something.
I think that would be a pretty good strategy to implement. We're definitely not implementing it to start because that's just not where we're at to start. And we have the old legal contracts, but I would like to move into that because that is once we can set it up. I mean, we're going to need to start paying people tomorrow or whatever. I mean, actually, people are getting paid for being here. So, you know, but I hope that you're able, if you can build that system, I would be in for it. But yeah, I mean,
I see that we do this because we have the monthly annexes. So we have like an agreement for 1 month, and this is based on tasks that you will do in this month. And then the next month is could be totally different to-dos or specifications for you. So it is more flexible the way we do it right now. So it's not the contract has like a framework that is a general framework for everyone, but the annex is really a very individual one, and this can change over time or will change over time, and also according to the iterations we're working on. So it's not set in stone that we set this up once and then it runs for 8 or 10 months. So I think I don't know if I understand Max correctly, but I think it matches what you just said, because it's based on the work that needs to be done.
I mean, we definitely have the flexibility to implement it to some extent. However, we are being more people focused than project impact focused and allocating the budget to some extent based off of individuals than strictly the DAO idea of like, this is where money goes. This much money goes for this for fundraising, right? And who wants it? You know, we're gonna have like colony level details about each task, and here's a bounty. It's like a DICO, right? Like that would be the dream. However, we kind of have a motion of individual contracts with humans to do the specific things. And I think we are definitely, like you said, Coach, be leaning towards that. But I want to give credence to Max's idea that it's a little deeper than just like, yeah, we review an individual's like workflow every day. It's more like, no, here's these tasks on Trello. Like it's like the idea of FCAN. I don't know if you ever saw that FCAN thing, but it's like, let's put money behind Trello cards and see who picks it up, you know, right? There's more.
Well, FCAN is more granular, like you pay per task or something, but we can do like bigger strokes, like just having, for example, this, I don't know, we need to check the strategy, but like each point is like, it costs, like, it doesn't even connect it with the specific, like, you need to do X, Y, Z, but yeah. But in the end of the month, you kind of write a report. For example, you was the sole person responsible for that, and there was allocated, I don't know, like 3K per month to do that. And in the end of the month, you write a report, like for this budget, I've done this, this, and this, and you can kind of compare that, you know, and you can see like if you spend lots of time on that or only part-time time. So it would kind of connect that this is how we invest money, this is the priority.
Mm-hmm. But I have two sort of challenges on those things. Is one is the quality that you will receive. So you have to assess the quality of the outcome, and then maybe this person will not be paid because the outcome is not as you wish it to be. And this also means that you probably wasted some time. And this is the second challenge I see is we really want to be this is not a project where we have too much time or want to spend like 2 years on building this. We want to be very clear, and we are very clear on what needs to be built. And that's why I think that just putting this on assignments and people pick up assignments will not work in a project management kind of workflow, because then you have so many loose ends, and they will, some of them influence others, and then if this is not built, then you cannot do the other part, and so on. So I think you really need a more hands-on approach or manual approach to that, where you really assign people to it, because we can judge on the skill set that these people have, and we've chosen, or all the people here have a certain skill set that we value and that we see beneficial for the project. And that's why we sort of try to coordinate that to get the best outcome in the best time frame. I think that's
and we're also just kind of limited by the legal structures that we have in place. You know, I mean, we have a certain groups of people, certain individuals that are, you know, working with us, and we have, you know, that understand what we're doing, and, you know, each one has their own specific situation, and so we can also blend to that, whereas and have individual connections. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I had a question on how we're going to do it now. Do I understand it correctly? Like, if we only raise the amount for like the first one and not the other, if we raise more, that like the weekly or the monthly pay is going to be higher.
Yep.
From the start.
Yep, from the start. So if we raise just for the first iteration, then let's say someone gets paid. Some people will get paid $500 a month, or sorry, no, like $500 a week. And then if we get the second iteration, then you get $600 a week. You get the third iteration, and the second that we get that third iteration, you get your raise. And that's even if it's mid-month or whatever.
And it doesn't matter if, like, you haven't started the second iteration yet.
No.
Based, what is the logic? Why do you need that? It's not like to stay long term.
Well, because the second we hit that third iteration, we actually have more work to do. So, like, now we start conviction voting, and now we have to control the vendor agreements for token bonding curve, the Giveth
Yeah,
DApp,
but I get
and
that. But that's, for some people, it will be more work to start planning ahead for something that's going to come in 2 months, or maybe 7 months or a year. When if we will get money enough for a second iteration, but they won't have to like start. Not everyone will immediately have to start to double their work or like do way more work just because we have more money. It doesn't make more sense to keep the money until we have more work.
Keep the money until we have more work.
Spend the money on the people and just give it when there is not. Just change the salary the moment that their workload increases.
That is the point. The raise isn't just for more money. The raise is because you're putting more hours in.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it doesn't sound hour-based. It just sounds like, oh, we got not 1 million but 2, so we're going to give you an extra salary.
Well, we got 1 million, not 2, so we're going to be working on the first 2 iterations simultaneously instead of 1. So
yeah, but that's just not going to happen in the beginning. My point is just like it makes more sense to evaluate the moment that we're there and change the salary if you see that you're spending more hours instead of just saying, oh, we got more money, so you just get extra money.
Well, it's not that you just get extra money. You also get extra responsibility and probably have to put in more hours. So, like, you know, obviously, if you're only being paid $500 a week, that's not a full-time job, right? Like, we wouldn't expect you to put in full-time hours if you're only being paid $500 a week.
No, but I got that. But we can move on. I just want to me, it makes sense that you evaluate the moment that you see that your workload increases, and that it's not going to be like, for me, immediately with like the moment that you see like in a month, oh, you reached 2 million. Now my workload doubles now.
But we have such a, like, it's not a very liquid we don't have a very liquid budget to work within. It's not soft, unfortunately. And like, yeah, I totally understand that based on like, I don't know, the way I think people should be managed or whatever. But as far as I know, like everything's really carefully calculated. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room.
I believe it's a weakness to have like tough budget, like we have $1 less, we couldn't do anything. Like, yeah, that could be like really hard to put off for like 100K, for example. But if you would have like this, like we have an idea of what we can do in this amount, right? Like we could be agile, that would be much more efficient for a startup like ours. Yeah.
There's something a question I'd like to raise in this discussion, is when do we start people on being paid out of common stack budget? Like specifically, Chris is a great case, right? Because he can be paid from Giveth until it's the right time for him to start being paid with this budget. And over this week, it seems like more and more like it's been pushing towards having people's contracts start earlier and earlier. And I know the original reason for why we're like, let's not start these contracts until September was because we know we're not going to meet the raise until then. And so I'm wondering, and we had to work in some back pay for some people that have already been like working super hardcore. But like, I don't think that we can calculate like everyone's pay to be in like some sort of created back pay buffer from this budget for the next like 2 months, and like some people will just have to stay on, their up, like getting paid through Giveth or whatever. So how do we?
So
I need to know.
yeah, what I would say is that for now, I mean, in the end, I'm fronting the common stack and I'm fronting Giveth. The common stack, we have a chance of getting paid back, or I have a chance of getting paid back, and Giveth, I don't. So I would ask that everyone who can get money through the common stack goes that route, because then I have a chance of being paid back, and that would be what I would like. And we do have buffer in the common stack to cover it. And also the common stack back pay budget, it doesn't account for all the comms people that would start early. That was an oversight of mine right now, and maybe we can add it. I guess we could add it in right now. It's not like the numbers are publicized. I could up that back pay budget. I don't want to change it, but of course it would. Like every dollar is accounted for. Plus, I mean, it's either we eat into the buffer or we change the numbers. So
You have the open budget inside our team.
this is up for debate. I was going to leave that for the next meeting, which is after lunch, on whether or not we should have open budgeting or not, and the merits of both options. But
is the roadmap and budget document open in the team now?
the roadmap and budget is the one document that's not. This is something that Coach B and I have discussed before, is the hiring and wages, which has what we estimated for everyone's salary. That's not open right now.
But I could send that.
Yeah, of course. The overall budget and allocated funds for each specific pieces is very public. And the only missing input is the hiring and wages, because we're not 100% sure that it is going to be for everyone to see. But we'll discuss the merits of that next after lunch. The other thing that is not mentioned here is bonuses. the reason that one of the big pieces around like why everyone gets a raise when we hit iteration 2, for me, is to keep incentives aligned. We need to hit iteration 2, and the whole team should benefit if we hit iteration 2. It's like a Christmas party, you know. Okay, this guy sucked at work, but you know what? We got to where we want, so we have a Christmas party, and everyone gets to be part of it.
Santa gonna be there?
Hell yeah, Santa's gonna be there.
With hit iteration, you mean that we hit the amount or that we started?
When we hit the amount, I mean that, and fundraising is something that everyone can do, you know, and everyone should be incentivized for us as a whole to gain more funds. And the other piece of incentivization is bonuses upon finishing iterations. So your salary might be $500 a week, but actually it'll end up being much larger than that because you'll get a $2,000 bonus when we actually finish the first iteration. So depending on, of course, what each matrix says. So these bonuses get larger as we get more iterations. So like the first iteration might be 1,600. Maybe the second iteration is 1,600 too, but then that third iteration, if we get to the third iteration, it might even change the second iteration's bonus, and it might go 1,600, 1,800, and 2,000, right? So the more iterations, the more budget we receive, the larger your bonus is. And each matrix, you know, these are going to be we're going to have these in the back of our mind, and we will need to have negotiations with each person about the budget. And I will say, like, my expectation right now is that Max and Adam, because it will be variable participation, would be more part-time and hourly, whereas Jeff, Chris, Lorelai, and I, and Coach B, and Sponette might be hourly as well, and then the rest of us will probably be more salary based and focused on like making sure that we are completing our goals.
Which one is salary based?
Sponette,
No.
or not Sponette, Coach B. Parker is also hourly based. And Z gets nothing unless we raise. So
Say I'm like probably much closer to Griff in that I'm just like burning money hoping that this works out.
exactly.
I care about it a lot.
Yeah. I think Z and I, well, we have a chance to break even. This is what we're hoping for, so let's do it, guys. Let's break even. Yeah. But that's okay. Well, Spana, you didn't get to talk much. Do you have anything you want to throw in?
Well, maybe two things. So I think the approach of like writing down these accountabilities for each and every one who participates, I think it's a good thing because that makes it clear for everybody who's working on what and what the expectations are. The only thing I didn't hear yet in this conversation right now is how so it's sort of people focused, which I totally understand. On the other hand, I think the budget should be spent as optimal as possible, in the sense that I think the accountability for each person is pretty important as well, in the sense that I think to a certain extent the priorities where the budget is spent should precede the importance of the person working on it. Of course, it's not a mix, it's not black and white, but I think it's important each month, for example, to review these accountabilities and, like, based on these metrics, have someone assess, like, and the person involved in each of these tasks where he's accountable for, should also do some self-assessment on that to see like, okay, have I actually been working on this month enough to validate the pay that I get for this? Because I think that's something we are due to all the people that want to invest in the common stack as investors. And I think if we make that clear also to the outside world, or at least to people who want to invest in this, I think it could be a sign of mature approach towards this, that it's not just people holding on to their position, let's say, in an organization, but that it's really based on this accountability. So I think that's a good thing. Other than that, yeah, for these bonuses, I think indeed some people are willing to take more risks into like investing their time, like Griffin Zargam, you just mentioned this as well. So yeah, I think this could also be taken into account into the pay in the end. Although, like for me, the payment is not the reason I'm here. Um, yeah, but of course, I think it's important in the end that everybody gets something to remain focused on the project. If you're doing too much pro bono work, sort of, your chances are that your attention gets pulled away to other things. So I think that's also some way of like locking in people. Maybe sounds too negative, but keeping their interests into delivering in time and with the right quality and so forth. So that's the only thing I think I want to add to the discussion, that I think we maybe didn't talk too much about that accountability, and I think it's to a certain extent important towards the efficiency of how we spend these funds.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything to that? Or?
So I'm not sure that the question was super clear, but I think it was just about staying accountable when you are a person that's on salary, and like it's and staying like agile too. Like did I spend the amount of time and energy this month that warrants that? Was that what you were asking about?
Yeah, so I think the approach, so the document you shared with me, I think it was very useful. And in my perfect world, I think you should be the one who sort of keeps track for each of us to make sure that sort of these accountabilities are measured like month over month, for example, to see like does it really make sense for this person to still remain accountable for this task, and then you sort of like ask around to see like and there are certain metrics, of course, but we don't want to go into full automation modes in the sense like everything should be measured and like should be I think it's partly a human check-off to see if everybody's performing, and I think it also makes clear for the whole group who they should talk to. Like in like a few I think already a few months ago, I was mentioning that thing that we used with Swarm City with the Falkfinger thing with the organigram, which is sort of not filled out, but you still have an organigram. I think it still can hold true with the way we are approaching this, to see that like everybody can feel accountable for certain things. Only their sort of name should be on that position. But it should be transparent for everybody. So I think it's a very good thing that it's also like written down on paper, or at least shared with everybody who they should talk to if they have questions for certain things, so they know who is accountable for what. I think that's very important. Also towards like external like contractor workers, for example. I think it's equally important, which is also not mentioned right now during our discussion, I think, is that I think it's important that maybe it speaks for itself, of course, but there should be one person responsible as a, sort of the single point of contact for each of these contracts that we or work that we put out. So, because I think it's very inefficient that we all have to reach consensus for like everybody giving his opinion on outcomes of each contractor. I think someone should be accountable for communicating with a certain contractor and then give sort of an assessment to say, I think they performed well enough, so I think they should be paid out, for example. And everybody else could say, okay, yeah, we know that this person from within the common stack agrees with this. So the discussion doesn't have to go the whole round table.
So actually for that, I mean, my expectation would be a simplified version of like the RACI charts where there's one person accountable for the decision and either people who are necessarily reviewers, but they don't make the decision, they just inform it. So for example, any particular contractor might have the person who makes the decision and the 2 to 3 people who are flagged as like, you know, giving an opinion. And it might even be the case that you get like a yes, yes, no, and then the person who makes the decision says, okay, well, I reviewed people's feedback and I made the call. It's enough to make sure that there's some semi-consensus without forcing us into a process that might not converge.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is the RACI chart is more of like a really detailed breakdown of the advice
Much
process.
simpler version of that. So I'm saying like it's only 2 roles.
Yeah. So like what I heard Spana saying was describing something that acts more as like a roles sheet and roles process. And I think we definitely will develop that. I'm hoping Max will like partner with me on this. And I think I will end up stepping into it more than I originally expected.
That's all I'm proposing. The RACI was an example of a system, not saying use that system. I think we want a pretty sparse system, but I think from what Spunnet was saying and that what you and Max might do, like my heuristics would be to start with something like one person has the sign off, but they're expected to have at least, you know, 2 or 3 other people who they're also expected to get feedback from before they make the sign off.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we have just a couple minutes, and we have another session coming up.
Yeah, yes.
Any tie down here?
No. We have another session after lunch on budget, so we can, if there's any questions, we can just move it to then. Let's take 7 minutes to be back at 10:05 for the next work session.
Max Kudanov is joining at 10, so if we can, 10:05 is fine.
Yeah.
I'll meet Max in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, this can stay on, but if you guys need to go to the bathroom, this is the moment. The next meetings are the tag call.
Tag presentations.
Yep, tag presentations. How nice is that?
Do you